Dana Milbank, a Jewish columnist for the Washington Post, in a recent article stated, "Before the American experiment, Jews in the diaspora were marginalized, ghettoized, persecuted, converted, exiled, or killed. As Jews, we know at some point the music stops. At least this is how it's been. This is burned into the collective consciousness of every Jewish person. Without the protections of voting rights, civil rights, belief in the rule of law, this country is not a safe haven for Jews or really anyone. So what is our response as Jews to the recent uptick in anti-Semitic rhetoric? Has the music already stopped in America? As a child of Holocaust survivors and a proud Jewish American woman and mother, I believe the response is this: to not be paralyzed by fear, to not run away and flee, to not give up on our democratic experiment, but rather to resist the extremist, anti-Semitic, inhumane ideology of what I see as belonging to a minority in our country. Because without freedom of expression, free exercise of religion, and the embrace of diversity in our land, without acknowledging that we are all made in the image of God and responsible to one another, there is indeed no safety, no country, no humanity, and no hope. And if there is one thing I want to leave my daughter and future generations, it is hope. Hope that America can be a nation where we are respectful of those who might not agree with us. Hope that we can work together for a more just, equitable, compassionate society. Hope that we can speak out when we see a wrong being done. Hope that there is always room for respectful discourse, for empathic listening, and for making peace where there is strife. I began learning about the extreme effects of anti-Semitism early on in my life. Both my parents were Holocaust survivors, and many of my family members were lost in that dark time for European Jewry and the world. I learned what happens in a country or countries when violent, unlawful acts against innocent people of a particular group are met with silence by those in power, who choose to say nothing so as to hold on to that power. I discovered what happened on the night of broken glass, Kristallnacht, 84 years ago this week in Germany, when hundreds of synagogues, Jewish shops, and businesses were broken into, destroyed, or badly damaged. Many Jews also lost their lives during that event. I wondered how it could be in the days before, during, and after this terrifying and terrible night that hardly anyone spoke out, tried to stop the violence, or at least condemn it. It is not hard to draw a direct line between the events of November 9th and 10th, 1938 in Nazi Germany and the ultimate killing of 6 million innocent Jewish souls that included my grandparents on both sides and the loss of many members of my family. There was my Aunt Fanny Fagala, my dad's older sister, whom he adored, a prominent concert pianist and teacher in Vilna, a highly cultured, intellectually driven, progressive city made up of both religious and secular Jews, the city often referred to as the Jerusalem of the East. Aunt Fanny, together with her physician husband and 3 sons, the oldest of whom had just started medical school, were picked up by the Nazis one evening in early 1941 from their apartment during dinner. When my father heard what had happened, he rushed over to the apartment. As he described it, the dinner rolls were still warm on the table. My aunt, uncle, and cousins died in the forest of Ponar on the outskirts of Vilna, a quiet, removed bit of woods I visited in the summer of 2019. The Ponari forest is about an hour's drive from the city center. How convenient. No one could hear the cries of the Jews being murdered in that forest between 1941 and 1944. Some 80,000 Jews died there. It was difficult for me to stand on the ground without trembling where so much slaughter had happened, where my relatives' lives and that of so many other Vilna Jews was stolen from them. I recited the Kaddish, said their names, said out loud that they hadn't been forgotten, and then sang the 23rd Psalm, hoping somehow my prayers would cross over to the world where these souls resided and bring some comfort and peace. On my mother's side, there was her mother and 16-year-old sister. They had been rounded up and brought to the train platform where they would be transported to Auschwitz. My mother often commented that she was so frightened, had she not been so young and strong, her heart would surely have given out. It was beating so hard and so fast. By some strange, incomprehensible stroke of luck, however, just before the train arrived, my mother was approached by a Hungarian man holding Christian identification papers and a ticket for another train on another platform. He said to her, "Here, take these. There is no guarantee you will survive, but at least you will make it to Budapest. You'll have a chance. Try not to be noticed. The Nazis are getting on and off the train, removing those they think are Jewish." My grandmother told my mother, who was 19 years old at the time, to take what this man was offering, to get on the train and try to save her life. She gave my mom a bag of cookies and a blessing. That was the last time my mother saw her mother. When the war ended, my mother learned that both her mother and her younger sister had died in Auschwitz. My mother did make it to Budapest, and at least for that moment in time, she was given a chance to live. Among the various Hebrew phrases from the Talmud that my father liked to quote to me and my 3 older siblings growing up was, "Hachaim v'hamavet biyad halashon." Life and death are in your tongue, in the words you say. And I remember hearing once a slight twist to the English nursery rhyme, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but only words can really hurt me." Words have power and consequences. Words can lead to deeds. When we bring our heart, our humanity, our empathy into our words, immense healing can come to a person. Such words can bring enormous peace of mind and comfort in a time of difficulty and unease. When we use our words to vilify, blame, shame, spread hate about others because of their faith, their skin color, their gender, or cultural identity, we are entering shaky and dangerous ground, and human beings are likely to come to harm and to suffer. In the 1949 theatrical production South Pacific, the brilliant and insightful composers Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote a song called "You've Got to Be Carefully Taught." You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. Despite everything my parents went through in the Second World War, somehow, thankfully, they never taught me to hate or speak ill of anyone. They were never bitter, and they somehow stayed kind and generous. My parents taught me to help others whenever I could, to be respectful of all people, to be a person who understood that her words mattered, that her words and music might bring people together and be a source of healing and peace in the world. Tonight, this 84th anniversary of Kristallnacht, we come together to remember, to bear witness, to affirm that falsehoods and hateful rhetoric cannot go unanswered, that silence is not an option when we hear someone speak with prejudice, disdain, and ignorance about the Jewish people or any people. Beth Keane, the CEO of the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles, said it well in a recent interview. We need to build a culture that's rooted in empathy and tolerance and treating all people with respect. That's where it really starts. How do you hate someone you don't even know? It makes no sense. We need to build bridges and broad coalitions and expand Holocaust education in our schools, places of worship, and community centers. Indeed. And as Jews in this America, we must look back, remember, and speak about the events of Kristallnacht when humanity took a dark turn and lost its way. We tell our stories so that history does not repeat itself, so that our futures will be brighter, our world safer and kinder. And in the words of the prophet Isaiah, everyone shall be able to sit under their vines and under their fig trees and never, ever be afraid again. Amen.